Well, here it is. It's the BAHCO Force. It's made in Portugal, and the one in front of you is the 21-inch version, or 530 millimeters in, shall we say, UK measurements. Right then, it does come with a guard for the blade. The blade has markings on it. It says sand cuts, and it states that it is the 51 530 millimeter, and it gives its brand of BAHCO. Right then, you get a nice sturdy plastic handle, and it isn't cheap plastic. I've been using this and it's been bashing up against the wood and being dropped, and it's got a kind of flexibility to it, and it's not that like kind of plastic that's going to shatter. You can wind the blade up very easily and release the tension, and on top of that, the blade itself is of a really good quality, and and it has a really aggressive teeth design on it, which really pulls that wood apart when you're cutting. As for ergonomics, this one really does go through some substantial wood. I mean, I've just cut these here. I give you some sort of idea. You can see I would have had to work around, but it went through this. I've counted the rings, and that's I've counted them, and if I remember rightly, it's a 48 to 50 ringed piece of wood, so that's obviously roughly around a 50-year-old piece of wood. So yeah, as you can see, it went through that no problem. The only thing I will say, when I was building this shed, I was doing it in the rain, and this saw was out in the rain. The blade didn't rust, but it would come up in sort of like a dark, stainy kind of look, which I can deduce is probably just the beginnings of corrosion. So I would say if you're using this in wet, damp conditions, you would have to oil this blade very regularly, otherwise you could possibly expect it to rust. Yeah, it came up in like almost like if you tipped a cup of coffee on it, and it had that kind of like brown staining. The paint on the handle is of a substantial quality, and it is not rubbing off very easily. As you can see, I've got marks there where I've been rubbing up and down on wood of this size, and you typically probably wouldn't process wood this size. But yeah, this saw is really good. I would recommend it. As for price, you can see, if I get it closer, I paid £21.99. You can find it cheaper, and find it cheaper in the bigger DIY stores. I went to a small local town one, and you obviously pay more in those, but I needed it there and then. So I will now show you how it performs cutting. Right, if you're wild camping or in the bush or doing bushcraft, this is possibly a typical size you would be using or processing. So I just lock it into this makeshift lock. You can see nothing extravagant, just old milk crates and a few bits of logs, improvisation. But right, I'll give you the saw there, and you can see the actual scale. As with most all bow saws and blades, you will need to do a back cut to start the sawing process. So we start at the back, and that's got a firm, positive feel, and you don't feel any blade, shall we say, movement. It does feel solid for that first initial cut to get you going, and that's quite important. If it doesn't feel solid there like some saws, it makes that first few passes quite bendy, wobbly, and difficult, shall we say. So yeah, so bring it back on that first one there, and I'm putting no pressure on that blade. I'm now using the full length of the blade as I've got into the wood. I'm just bringing my speed up now because it's passing through the halfway mark. And there you go. And that was with no pressure and no aggression, and basically just doing a very lightweight draw and push on that blade and the saw. And the saw felt nice in my hand. As you saw, there was no me having to go up, down, force or do anything to manipulate it. It just went through. Like I said, the ergonomics, the feel of the handle, everything was right. And if you're processing wood of this size, there'd be no problem. As I said, I constructed this woodshed from, shall we say, commercial lumber, which is tannalized and treated, straight from the yard. This is soaking wet. It's as wet as it could be. It's been sat outside in the yard, and my shed is still drying out from when I've made it. So that's usually a good test of how a blade and saw will function, because wet wood is possibly the most challenging for a saw to work in. So let's just see how this works. Right, yet again, place it at the back so you get the biggest draw, and I'm going to start cutting. And as you can see, this is a substantial piece of wood, which is what I used as my supports. So here we go. There. Cutting through. I'm not putting no pressure again. I'm letting the saw find its own way through. That handle is feeling nice. I'm increasing the speed now. I'm not putting pressure, just speed, because the saw is allowing me to do that. Now it's supported in the wood. You can clearly hear it's making its way through that wood easily. And it's really ripping that wood out. The sawdust on the floor is coming out really fine. There you go. Straight through. And that's tannalized commercial lumber for building, and it is so wet. That saw just went through it. It didn't bind or drag or hang up. You can see the blade has really gone through the wood in a very efficient manner. When it was coming back out and ripping and pulling on it, it wasn't doing so as in clenching and gripping the wood. It was actually coming back through and producing this nice powdery stuff. It was just so easy going through. A saw that isn't really doing its job will bring out almost like slivers of wood. There was none here. That blade really did do the job. They do this in various different sizes, and I think there are various different models for different types of wood even. You can find all that out online, but as for this small one, it's perfectly capable of being, shall we say, used in the domestic setting for small firewood. I've obviously just shown you I've used it for big wood, which traditionally probably a chainsaw would have been your bet, but it will cope with that. Like you say, wild camping, bushcraft, this is an all-round little blade. It's not something that you're going to carry with you, like shall I say, strapped to your backpack or anything like that. It's something that you are purposely holding or taking with you. But if you're in like a permanent location or somewhere you're not going to be moving from, this is definitely a saw that you could take on one of those trips. Yeah, so I fully recommend it, and I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope that you've got some idea of what this little saw can do. I thought I'd possibly better just show you the actual saw in question's dimensions so you can get a rough idea. So as you can see, I'm holding this width way so you can see the actual dimensions of it to a person. As you can see, it's small enough to be portable, but big enough to do the job. So I should imagine the bigger ones would be something you would use, say, definitely around the homestead, farm, or your home. They would not really be portable enough to go into the field.